I hear it from teachers. There's no time. We don't have money for that. Every time you bring up something new or different, it's automatically a negative thinking. We can't, I'm already loaded down. We've already spent our budget. Our schedules are full. We're already tired. We have too much to do. And on and on and on and on. The assumption is that by doing something new, you're going to add burden. What if I told you that by adding something new, you lessen burden? See, logically, it doesn't make any sense. Any good cook knows that by adding things to a recipe, things don't get more burdened and ruined. They get better up to a point. I hear it all the time. Here's what I want to say to you. Small things can make significant differences. Now, I'm old enough to remember the old Safecracker movies. I don't know if you know this, but I remember this. Black and white movies. Geez, how old am I, right? Old enough to know better. Safecrackers, they would get down and use the dial, put their ear to it. Well, truth, I wasn't a safecracker. I taught some. I stayed in Holiday Inn. No, they would take an emery board and they would bite their fingernails down to the quick, and they would take an emery board and write down into the quick, take their nails down, so that they hurt, but they were sensitized. They could feel the tumblers in a safe combination. They would turn them, click, 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 and they could feel the tumblers fall into place. Couldn't hear them, but you could feel the little movement inside. There are 60 numbers on a slightly large safe, sometimes 100. You go once to the right, a certain number, back around past 0 to the second combination number, back around past 0 to the third combination number, and open the safe. That's how a combination safe works. Okay. How many of those little notches, how many clicks, how many numbers do you have to be off in those 3 spins to not be able to open the safe? That's right, 1, just 1. So if the combination is 89, 79, 69, and you get it right, 89, 79, 68, it ain't gonna open. One little tiny notch, one little tick, one little click, and that safe just sits there and stares at you. Okay? How many mosquitoes does it take in your darkened bedroom, buzzing around, keeping you awake at night? What's a mosquito weigh? What do you weigh? Compare the two. Who's the bigger? Who's really, really, really small? And yet, they keep you from being a slumbering giant. Okay, one little mosquito. My stepfather was a bomber pilot in the Second World War. I don't know if you know much about the Second World War, but we almost lost that sucker. We'd all be doing Stig Heil. The Americans didn't join the war till after Pearl Harbor, and of course we declared war on Japan, and then almost immediately thereafter, since Japan and Nazi Germany were working together, we declared war on Germany. Made the people in England very happy because they've been needing help. They were getting bombed every night in London. So our bombers flew over to, either flew over or transported over on ships, I don't know, or even made in England. And then it's just a few miles across the canal into Europe. and Germany had taken over France and Holland and, of course, Belgium and Germany. And so we flew our bombers over the English Channel and dropped bombs on various places, including, of course, all the German cities. And my stepfather was a bomber pilot, I believe it was a B-36 Flying Fortress, not sure, big. Had gunners in the bottom and gunners in the nose and gunners in the tail and gunners in the sides. And he and a co-pilot were crammed into quarters up front. And behind them was a navigator. They couldn't even touch each other because they're all wedged in. Very cold. They didn't have heat in the plane. They wore like fur-lined everything and boots and hats because it got very cold. It was just miserable. Well, the odds were terrible of surviving. I mean, 50%. They go out with 100 planes and sometimes only 50 would come back. And the limit was 16 missions. Very few pilots made it to 16. Most of them died. And that's why they set it at 16. I'm convinced. I mean, my stepfather lost many friends, just said he saw them go down in balls of fire. And sometimes he would tell us what he heard on the radio as people were heading towards the ocean or on fire. And of course, he would come back thanking his lucky stars. One day they came back and the engineers had come out to examine the planes, the flight crew, because they had holes, would come back with flak. I don't know if you know what flak is. Big artillery shells go up. They're canisters filled with scrap metal, and they burst apart, explosive. The casings tear apart in the jagged metal. They fly apart, and they hit the planes. They hit the gasoline tanks. They hit the people in the planes. They kill them. They rip off the wings, the fuselage, the ailerons, the propellers, and the planes crash. It's a nasty, nasty thing. So they were examining his plane, and there was holes in it where flak, is what they call it, this scrap metal, had gone through the plane. And one of the flight crew looked at my stepfather and said, "George, look at your pants." And he looked down, and they didn't used to wear skin-tight clothes in those days. And he looked down, and the back of his pants behind his knee were missing. He looked in. He said there's a hole through the fuselage right where the pilot sat. Went through one side, a hole this big, and came out the other side. Went underneath his legs and the co-pilot's legs, clear through the fuselage, and took out the back of his pants. And he fainted on the runway. He was a mess after the war. Had ulcers. He was a mess. Then he came home and was a B-52 pilot in the Strategic Air Command during the Cold War. But anyway, 1 inch, and he would have lost his knee. He probably would have died because there was no way to give first aid in those planes, and he probably would have died. So 1 inch, one mosquito, one click, sometimes one word can make a difference. One phrase can make a difference in a child's life. One eye contact, one hug, one compassionate thing said can make a difference in a child's life. It costs nothing. It takes no extra time. And it can make a huge difference. So take 1 minute and think of how many one-word or 2-word or 3-word things you could say that would have an impact on a child's life. The best way to do it is go back to your own childhood and think about adults in your life. What 1, 2, or 3-word thing, make a list. What 1, 2, or 3-word things could they have said to you that would have really changed your day and maybe your life? Well, let's face it, if you change a day, you've changed a life. Think on that. Just take a minute. The power of one. Don't underestimate the power of an effective teacher. should I say, Anthony Dallmann-Jones signing off.